Hello, everybody, and welcome to Table 13. That's my best leg introduction that I've
It's
got for
pretty
you.
solid.
Yeah, basically. I didn't look enough at the microphone. I don't look enough at the microphone when I talk. Or the microphone. That's a camera, not a microphone. Thanks
I
everybody
was
for
like, does
tuning
he
in,
do that?
and that's going to be the end of our show tonight.
Good night,
That's it.
everybody.
Um,
I'm just gonna call it right there.
we are short a leg. Leg is gone.
Mm-hmm.
He's run away. He's
It's the
somewhere in the
wooden leg.
woods, and
Wait, hop. It's
we've
only
sent out
one
a
leg.
search party, and maybe they'll find him. But in the meantime, we have Kyle.
A
Hi, Kyle.
disappointingly second choice.
We got Eric. I don't know which side he's on because I don't have the OBS, but Eric's on here somewhere.
I-
Um,
I'm around.
I'm Brett or Shady or whatever you want to call me. I go by any name that you can come up with, and wherever Kyle's located is where Kyle's
He's below
I'm
both
here.
of us. Yeah.
at. Kyle runs our Gods of Aether game, and does some other twitchy things. So he's here to talk about skills with us. We do a thing when somebody can't make it where we talk about skills.
I
And
mean,
we've only got like enough for 2 episodes there, so we can't miss anymore.
it was just
Um,
an easy canned topic. I was like, wow, it's a big list of things that we can spend like fucking 6 minutes each on, and we got an episode or something. But
And that,
you
and that
know.
might actually be the problem. That's because there's so little to talk about. You only get 2 episodes out of it.
Nah, it's a short list, but yeah, so that's I guess we can probably just get going into it here. But so that's a decent place to start though. Is so between the two of you here, what are your gripes with the 5e skill system? What are things that you really like about it? Let's start with Kyle as the guest here.
Well, I'm going to take the easy and obvious one, so I'm sorry for leaving you guys with the more harder to answer solutions. My gripe and well, both my gripe and what I like about it are the same thing, and that is it being based in the bounded accuracy system. Uh,
Okay.
what that means for those listening who may not know, the way the D&D 5e system is designed is to keep the number crunching to a minimum, and as such, in fifth edition, if you've played it or if you had any experience with it, you're 20, you're 21, you're 22, 24 is really like a godly roll compared to say Pathfinder, where you're rolling like in your 40s and
Mm-hmm.
50s when you get strong enough in the skills. And because of that bounded accuracy system, um, you get two things. One is someone who is completely untrained in something or has little to no experience with it can, by the grace of a good roll, with good luck, roll high enough to pass a DC and succeed on a skill check. And that's great. That leads to some fantastic role play situations, and all around, it's a wonderful addition. But it is also where my gripe is at, and that is you lose out in fifth edition. I think sometimes with this, in the sense of your character being having a character that's like, this is what my character, like, I'm a master thief. I should be able to pick that lock, and I couldn't, but the barbarian could and didn't do anything. So like systems like Pathfinder. Or even the older school D&Ds where you can see it was built for that kind of specialization in mind. Um, you lose a little bit of that magic with fifth edition, but I think the trade off is worth it, and when you have a good group.
That makes
Absolutely.
sense.
I agree with you 100%. I kind of like the idea of like if I put all my points into something, I want to be good at it. I don't want to fail at it half the time. Still, with like a DC 15, to never fail with it, you got to have plus 14 on it, basically. Um, which doesn't happen very frequently. I mean, you get to some
Unless you
pretty
have
high skill
reliable
levels
talent.
before you. But my problem with it is I think when they moved from 3.5, because fourth edition doesn't exist, when they moved from 3.5 to fifth edition, they took away a lot of skills. They combined a lot of things. I think they split a couple of things. Maybe not. I don't know. I don't think they
Oh,
really did. I
they
think they
kind of like
renamed stuff a little
reclassified
bit.
some stuff,
Yeah,
sort of. Yeah.
but they grouped a lot of stuff together that like is it a perception or is it an investigation check to find a trapped door? You know, it is
It's
perception,
thieves'
I believe,
tools.
is what. Oh, is it?
I mean, depends. Yeah, that's
Like
that's one of the
that's the
things
thing.
that I
Like
would say is there's enough
I
flexibility
I'd
that
love
there's
to have a
usually three
find
answers.
traps roll, you know,
Right.
or some
I
way to
mean, I would say that that is a thieves' tools proficiency
a
is
sweet. Yeah, you could
pretty
do
much
that.
supposed to serve that purpose. Like
I would
it's
think
what's
like
supposed to be able to disarm that stuff and
I would
unlock
think
and
like perception to
break locks
find
and
it,
stuff.
or investigation to find it, and then that to disarm it. You
Sure,
know,
that makes sense.
but
I, eh, yeah,
you end up running into a situation where it's like you're always using acrobatics, or you're
sure.
always using persuasion,
Mm-hmm.
and there's not. I don't know. I'm used to playing systems that have a lot of skills, and this has. I mean, it's got. I mean, it's got 20 some or something like that, but it's
Right.
not. This ain't no hero system with
Right.
freaking
Exactly.
book
I mean,
this big to describe what the skills do.
it's not even 3.5 with like, there's like 25, 30 skills. And then also there's these like knowledge blank skills and
Right.
profession blank skills and perform blank skill. But I do think that some of that stuff is rolled into the tool proficiencies. And that there is some sort of spread that happens with those that you can use to sort of cover like specialized skill area, like if they need
Like
to
with
know
dwarves,
something.
like you get advantage when making um history checks relating to stonework and shit. Like
Right.
they do split it up like that for certain things, which is fine. And honestly, the less rules, the more you just kind of have to be willing to be flexible
Right.
and do all that. So, I mean, it is what it is. I'm not a super huge fan of the skill system,
It gets the job
but
done.
it does, yeah, it does the deed.
I would say that's maybe my biggest gripe is that it's not uh, it's not fleshed out super well, in a sense that like if you compare the way skill challenges are covered in a book compared to how like combat encounters are covered in a book, the split on rules is like huge. It's 10 to 1 probably, but like and obviously
You
I
got
don't think
4
that you
pages denoted to skills.
yeah, all of them, all of the skills total.
Right.
And like, it's like, well, that's, but then of course there are these random little paragraphs here and there sprinkled throughout to like, oh yeah, like skill set proficiency with this lets you do this. It's like, but so I do think it's a little poorly conceived in that sense, like, or maybe not poorly conceived, but not completely fleshed out. Yeah, is the best way I think can think of. There's like more, um yeah, just like what do you really want us to be doing with certain skills, like if you clearly establish that somewhere and what certain checks are supposed to do, um then I think that would help, because I do, yeah, like Kyle was saying, the bounded accuracy system is actually, I think, really helps the skill check situation a lot, because yeah, like it makes it so that anybody, if they roll well, can succeed at something, and then anybody, if they're really skilled, like it's not that hard to get a +9 on a skill
Yeah.
check, and so you're going to get over 10, and so like middle of the road, not overly complicated tasks, you're going to pass even if you roll a 1 kind of thing. And so I think that there's something that happens with those, uh, that that's like a positive thing that makes it so that it's almost along the lines of like Monster of the Week or whatever, where you can have these conditional successes or um, a little added, yeah, and then yeah, and the other was added flexibility, as far as there's usually 3 or more reasonable answers to any like thing. It's like, oh well, I want to convince him of this. Well, I could intimidate him, I could persuade him, I could roll a deception on it and like lie my ass off, um, or use one of several different knowledge based checks to get at a certain piece of information or something like that. But I think that's kind of a good thing, and
It's funny you bring it up, when you mention like, all right, this is the skill, but what can I do with it? Like give me more information. I've been doing a little deep dive into Pathfinder Second Edition. I've been wanting to get back into try and run it, and I wanted to relearn the system. And one of the things it does with its skill system, which I think could easily be implemented by a home rule in the fifth edition to make skills a little more viable, or at least give them more flavor, is when you train in your skills in the second edition Pathfinder, you actually unlock skill. There are skill abilities that are just as potent and just as viable as certain magic spells. So, like for example, Intimidate. If you focus your on your levels up, putting skill points into Intimidate, eventually you can unlock a skill ability where you can intimidate somebody to death. You can scare the life out of them.
The life out of them. That's awesome.
And every skill has those little tier things that you can unlock.
Okay. I think Shady, I think you had found on Reddit or something somewhere that there was like a skill trick or like a feat replacement thing that reminds me of. If you want to talk about that.
I found a thing. It was I can't tell you who made it off the top of my head, but I'll link it in the Table 13 chat when we're done here, because I have it still. But it's essentially takes feats out of the game and replaces them with these like half feats that you get that are based off of skills. You have to be, you have to be proficient with the skill, and then they kind of they break up the skills and all these different things. It's super cool. I've used it and I love it. And my players have loved it. So
it's a lot
I'll throw that in Table 13 in the Discord if you guys join that and see that after the stream, and y'all can take a look at it.
It's real good.
Cause it seems like something that we all have an agreement here when it comes to skills is their lack of information means we, as DMs, you have to kind of come up with ways to get your players engaged with the skill system, because I mean, we've all been players too. You only want things that work and work well. Those are the things you want to focus on. So, if your DM never asks for an acrobatics check or an athletics check, you're not gonna really pay attention to those kinds of things. So that's something that I do as far as talking about how do we use them, and maybe we talk about that. How do we incorporate skill usage into our games to make it fun and exciting for players to engage with?
Sure. I think that's a really good way to do it. And because that's the things I was going to say, it's something I try to include as much as possible, or at least involve. I just like to involve skill checks in social encounters and things like that, where checks maybe don't necessarily. It's not a gate for success. Like if you don't get over a certain number, you're not going to be able to achieve your objective. But that sort of flavor the interaction or the social encounter or the whatever in a way that, it's sort of similar to Monster of the Week. They'll do this, the conditional success stuff. It's, if you roll low enough, then maybe the guy's just intrinsically thinks you're up to something and isn't going to be as inclined to help you. But, it's still social interaction. There's still ways to get around that. And then you've involved a function of some characters like bards and rogues and stuff that is like mechanically a big part of like what they're for. Like that they give up some other stuff to make sure that they have access to these skill proficiencies for days and everything, expertise and everything. So I just try and, like knowledge skills, I try to make it so that there's valuable information that can be gained periodically. Like if something comes up and they're like, hey, would I, is that familiar to me? It's just like, okay, everybody who's proficient in history, make a history check or something like that. And it's like, yeah, okay, here's about how you'd know about it or about what you'd know about it. And then somebody's like, well, can I make an arcana? It's like, all right. And then, you give them a slightly different picture maybe, but that's, and then the other thing that I try to do would be if I can, and it usually makes sense that there's like 2, maybe 3 options for every check to say, oh, well, you can intimidate them. You can, if you want to do it like this, if you want to persuade them, you can roll a persuasion. If you want to deceive them, you can roll a deception check. I usually don't ever just ask for one check unless it's, you're trying to grab somebody. It's like, okay, that's an athletics check. That's what it is. You got to but But that's the other thing is I try to be as flexible as possible to let people use the skills that they're proficient in, so that
Yeah,
they're not
One
dreading
thing
it.
that
I
one thing
guess.
that bugs me about how people utilize skills is when somebody's like, I want to jump 2 feet across this ledge, or I want to skin this. I mean, not skin the, yeah, skin this animal. These for some people these are routine fucking tasks, right?
Sure.
And so I treat stuff like that. If you're proficient in it, you just fucking do it. Like there's no rolling because
Yeah.
if you're a hunter and you're proficient with survival, you've spent a lot of your time out in the wilderness doing survivally things. You're
You've
probably not
got the
going to fuck up
ranger
skinning a
feature
rabbit,
that lets
right?
you provide food for your whole,
Right.
party or whatever. Yeah,
You're
right.
probably
You're
not going
not
to mess
gonna.
up skinning a rabbit, or if you're a trained athlete, you're probably not going to have trouble clearing a 2.5 foot gap. There's
Yeah,
certain things that it's
that's
just
one that
like
gets
I want
me.
to
Jump
eliminate that
distance.
possibility for somebody to just fail at something they should know how to do. So I'll do that sometimes with history checks on very like basic history stuff, or arcana stuff. But um, I do. I say, other than that's kind of my one like thing that I do different from a lot of people. I think is just skipping skills. Fuck it, you're
Yeah.
proficient with it. This is simple enough.
Uh,
You do it.
there
I
are
think that
certain
there's something to
tasks.
be said about that, though.
Right.
Yeah, like proficiency in the older D&D. Sorry to talk over you there,
Oh, you
Kyle,
good?
but in the older D&Ds, there was checks that you could only make if you were trained in a certain skill,
Right.
and I kind of like that concept, even if it's not necessarily put into practice the same way. It's what you're saying there is that there's just given knowledge basically that you have access to because of your background or whatever. I think that that's reasonable, that there's like a difference between you and somebody who's not proficient in survival. And if it's, so you don't have a 1 in 20 chance of, fucking up the rabbit, like, why not? Like, they can do that for a living. They should absolutely be able to just go ahead and knock it out. Um,
Right.
but if you were like trying to make like a code or something,
Right.
maybe
Yeah. No, there's certain
I'll
things
ask
that
you for a survival check to see how good of a skinning job you do,
if
and
you're trying
that's
to if you're trying to skin like some kind of really rare creature, that maybe you've never
yeah,
skinned before,
like
and
a
you
rust
understand the
monster,
concept
or
of it, and
whatever,
you understand the concept of doing it and sort of how to do it for similar creatures, but this is new to you, so let's see how you do.
and like you're never gonna outright completely fail, maybe, or well, probably, like there isn't like a zero gain circumstance that's
Right.
likely, but maybe you ruin half of it because you like it takes you a while to get it down or
Right.
something,
You
and
skinned a boomalope.
A boombaloo.
kaboom.
It's a rim world thing. When you kill it, it
Oh.
explodes
Oh yeah. I might
And
have
then
to live on
starts
that one.
forest fires and
and kills your entire
destroys
colony.
your whole settlement. Yeah, every time. It's almost as bad as a lightning storm. But but yeah. So I think that's like an interesting thing as well, is just sort of so where's that line, I guess, when you guys are doing social interactions or anything else? I guess that's the big one for me, is social interactions is where skills maybe sometimes fall by the wayside. But where do you guys just disregard skill checks when otherwise you might think should be by the book or something?
Well, for me, the only time, and I agree with Shady on this a bit, the only time I completely disregard asking for a skill check at all is when the degree of success is so high that it's not even worth a roll. Like, yeah, of course, you know how to do this. But I try to avoid doing that too much because you don't want to take skills entirely out of the equation.
Right.
So I guess I'll answer that question by saying what I do to include skills as much as possible, based off of uh, how the players role play and how they interact with the world. Because at the end of the day, when I sit down at the table to host a game for a couple of players, I want them to feel like it is a tailored experience for them. And as such, I'll look at their character sheets, see what their characters are good at, what they might, and I might even ask them sometimes, in certain situations, how would your character react? Like, what kind of character are you trying to build here? And so, when the players are, just any situation where if the players are trying to find a way to up the tension or up the drama, that's where skill checks come into wonderful play. A barbarian that wants to rage and yell at a bartender for not bringing him a beer, well, give me an intimidate check. It may lead to a bar fight, or it may scare everybody away.
Yeah.
Just trying to find ways to include them into the story, and then you get your players involved with that, and they'll want to start using it more. And ultimately, I think where fifth edition lacks as far as specialization and the minutia of the skills, the system is at least set up enough to where it's easy to implement into role play situations. Which, I mean, that's what the entire system has. That's what their focus and mantra was getting back to the role play.
Right.
So in that regard, I think skills are wonderful to bring in. Like on that intimidate check for the barbarian, for example, it doesn't, unless they roll like a very high number, it's going to be a success anyway. But at least it adds drama to the situation for the roll to happen.
Yeah, or if they roll a 1, maybe they, the guy just laughs in his face or something, and it becomes, it changes the situation in that way. So I think it's important to include, and like Cortex has said there in chat, every now and again professionals do fuck up too. So I think that, if a 1 isn't just like a cataclysmic failure or something, then maybe, every time they roll a 1, it's some sort of, even if they get a +9 and it was a DC 10, maybe there's some sort of negative set of circumstances that happen. I generally don't do that. I'm not a big fan, because I'm of the, it's like, you guys are heroes. You don't, need to trip while you're tying your shoes or something. But like, but I get, and I understand that that's something's, some people are going to want that the chance of failure is just as important as the chance of, critical success on that kind of stuff. Right. And I don't know, there's no harm in that either. But
I sort of draw the line on those because I'll do that too. Even skinning a rabbit, like, my example, every once in a while they'll roll. And I think I try to save that for situations where everybody's counting on them, everybody's watching them.
Yeah.
Or they're trying to achieve something above regular means. And that way you don't have because a professional doesn't have a 5% chance of ruining a simple thing. But I think the times when it matters is when there's narrative tension behind it.
And then a 5% chance is reasonable.
It's not really a 5% chance because maybe he's done it 10 times between those.
Exactly.
So it's a 0.5%,
That makes sense. I think
so
that's
it's I think
works.
and that's when it that's when those comedic
comedy guys,
them jokes, yo.
that's when those really shine, is because like everybody's looking over your shoulder as you're trying to tie your shoe and accidentally you stab your toe with a knife you had in your hand,
because the knot was just too extreme and you had to cut and boom, bleeding everywhere.
And then it becomes a story that the party can then give that person shit about for the next 32 years.
And that's, I think, the goal, whatever you're doing at the table. So yes, absolutely. No, I meant to make stories that are worth remembering after the session, is like to have things that you do talk about. Yes, and use to give your friends shit, because that's how friends work, right?
We do it for the lulz.
The lulz. It's all about the lulz. But we should get moving toward actual individual skills here. Otherwise, we'll not make our way through the whole list, probably.
Thanks everybody for joining us at table 13. Now we're gonna get started on the actual content.
No, that was a point. That was the important. We wanted to do a broad, conversation, but it's not allowed.
We left off at medicine. The skill in the book that has a 10-word sentence to describe what it is, and I will read you that. A wisdom medicine check lets you try to stabilize a dying companion, or diagnose an illness. That is the entirety
So that's
of
what
the
you get.
medicine description. Um,
I think you
I
get
mean,
maybe
that's
a little more on the particulars of that in the like death save
areas.
section, but yeah, I mean it's really not super well handled, not deeply treated in the slightest. But to me it's basically like a knowledge based skill. Obviously, they did away with all the like knowledge parentheses blank skills that existed in 3.5, and I think Pathfinder had those as well, but I'm not sure. But this is one of those, and to me it's sort of like a knowledge humanoids kind of a deal. I like the idea that if you've studied, if you're proficient in medicine, then you know something about how most humanoids are put together, basically, and in that you're familiar with most forms of common humanoid life because you would be able to treat them medically.
Right. You
and
treat
it's
it like a fantasy biology or physiology.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and that's I think kind of the difference to me. I think that in the book it kind of gives it to you like it's a base first aid proficiency, and I feel like it's really more than that. It's more like a PhD in like medical science or something, or medical doctorate. Like it's yeah, like it's not like, oh yeah, I've got my like Red Cross CPR class finished or something. It's a bit
The
more than that
30
to
minute
me.
class on
Right.
chest compressions.
Staying alive, everybody.
Yeah, no, I would I mean, it's pretty straightforward. That's the thing. Like I use it a lot for sort of like medical forensics. Which is, I mean, it says
Sure, yeah.
here,
Yeah, like how did something
diagnosing an
die or
illness, that
whatever.
kind of thing. When you find a body that's just
Sure.
lying about, and trying to figure out the cause
As you
of death.
do.
Yeah, I mean that's all right.
All the time.
That's how I got so good at it.
Mm-hmm.
So I'll use that and give them clues to how they died, or maybe who killed them. It kind of
Right.
given like putting a little mystery and an element in it. Somebody with medicine would be really helpful in a scenario like that. Um, uh, if you've got like because there's a lot of UA classes and stuff that are, well, not a lot of them, but there's like a doctor class that you can find, or there's you could flavor an artificer to use injections and stuff.
Okay. Sure.
They could utilize that for sort of you know administering what they're doing.
Yeah. A stand-in for Arcana in like if you're trying to like reskin them or something, maybe.
Right.
But
other than that,
I
it doesn't
think
get a ton
that's
of use. Just when people get knocked out, or and people try to bring them back up.
Stabilizing folks.
Which then you get kind of mixed between that and the medicine kit, which from what I understand doesn't require a medicine roll. You just poof and they're better.
Yeah. That's
so
sort
it's
of like,
completely
well,
made
why would I
obsolete.
ever? Yeah,
Right.
why would
Just
I
buy
ever spend an action on something that might fail when I could just use a guaranteed consumable that's by level 5 so cheap you don't care anymore, kind of thing. And but yeah, so I think that's why I try to broaden it a bit where possible, and use it in situations where it's like, okay, how did he die, what, or like like sort of as a knowledge about humanoid based creatures, like maybe you can get some sort of gist of other stuff about them because you've learned these anatomical details about them. You were forced to become familiar with some other pieces of their like culture or whatever stuff. I don't know.
Let me hit you with a hypothetical.
Sure.
A shady cheesing the rules scenario.
Yeah,
okay?
absolutely.
I roll up a ranger, right? I want to make a medicine check to try and determine where best to shoot this person.
Okay.
Would you give me some kind of benefit to my damage if I roll well on a medicine check?
I probably could see like working some sort of mechanism for that into the game, but I would probably like say, okay, but you have to spend a bonus action to aim, and then you get over X with your medicine check, and that gives you like a, it doubles your favorite enemy bonus or something like that.
Right.
So I could see that. That wouldn't be totally outlandish to me, but or you could do maybe more of a bonus than that or something. I think archers, the NPC thing, they've got like a D10 to attack or damage. Maybe you give like a a D6 or something on damage, an extra D6 or something, or you whatever. But I think that you could maybe, there's something to be done there to make medicine not like totally useless, and that could be a really cool concept for sort of like specialist
I was just about to say that's a
killer kind of guy.
that is an amazing ranger like concept build. Like I don't think I've seen that in 5th edition where like a ranger that like specialized. He is such a great monster hunter that he has figured out the components and the anatomy and the vital systems of these monsters, and he's able to effectively take them out based on his medicine roll.
Just like dismantle them or something, you know, like that's cool. I think that's an interesting concept. I think you could do something similar with a fighter, and like, he's like a, Krav Maga kind of guy.
Right.
And it's, or a monk or whatever. And it's, that could be a really cool concept. That's a similar idea. It's like, oh no, like, cause I fight in a way that was devised by doctors, not by fighters. It's like, ooh, like that's scary. Like, no, like no thanks.
I can make your body stop working.
Yeah, like
the monk
no.
shit, like the fucking, like you hit the 5 spots and then you die in 30
take 3
seconds.
steps and just collapse. Yes, no. Oh man. But yeah, so I think that there's room to try and include more with medicine.
Absolutely.
But it's not super reasonable. Like there's not a lot for it in rules as written. It doesn't seem like.
One of my
there's
personal
one
house rules for medicine checks on natural 20s, you are allowed one free CSI Miami one-liner.
Ooh.
Especially when you're doing forensics on a body.
Looks like he checked out early. And then glasses on.
Damn. Oh man, that's so good. Fuck yeah.
I'm incorporating that in my game immediately.
Yeah, I'm also going to be adopting that. Someone getting, all I can think of is the one episode where it's the dude who, I think somebody gets stabbed in the eye with something, and you can't say he didn't see it coming. And you just know
like
it's coming before he says it, and it's so good. Oh god, that's great.
If you roll a natural 1, do you have to like interact with everybody like Ice Cube does? So you're telling me Ice-T? Oh my god, Ice Cube.
Are we there? No.
Oh Jesus Christ! And it was live for the whole world.
Everybody saw it. Inexcusable.
No, I give up then. I'm just gonna end I was gonna come up with something funny, but you've ruined it. That was all your fault.
I didn't do it.
Yep, it was all.
We're gonna go ahead and move on to nature checks here, which is our next skill.
Oh, which is just about as underutilized, I think, as medicine.
Yeah, it's really I was gonna say, I'm not staring at the section in the book right now, but I mean it's it's another one that I don't think the knowledge skills, these knowledge based checks, get a lot of love in 5e. There isn't they don't in 3.5 every monster type was tied to a certain knowledge type, and you could basically be able to have your character know the stat block if you rolled high enough on that check, and that whole mechanism's basically not there, rules as written anymore anyway, in 5e. But I work something similar to that, I guess. Like, if it's plant-based or, fae stuff, animals, those all probably fall under nature for me. But I think that most things, I think that there's a lot of overlap between nature, or things that would be rolled for nature, or that you would roll a nature check for, and things you would roll a survival check for. A lot of times it seems like.
There is a lot of overlap. There's because if you're gonna go pick herbs, right,
Right.
or a potion, I
Yeah.
think a nature check is what you would use. But if you're gonna go pick berries to eat, then a survival check would be what you would use.
Or you could use an herbalist kit.
Or you could do that because
But that's, yeah, it's like
why
there's,
have the skill and then the kit?
that's the thing is, yeah, it doesn't seem like it makes sense to have both. But some of the toolkits are so specialized that there isn't a lot of room, or there isn't a lot that it does that you couldn't also do with something else that you have the same bonus in, because it's, also whatever, something you're proficient in, and like, I don't know. So that, yeah, I think that there are some of these, but by virtue of the fact that they're just not super well defined, because I don't think they wanted to hem in. They didn't want to set specific DCs for too many things that people had to worry about. So you really, like, there aren't that many built-in functions for a lot of these skills.
And I think that's by design, because you
Right.
look at like a game like I'm trying to get all the stuff for Traveler straight, and looking at like the skill stuff for that, it's like here's a table of things you can do and how much their DCs are, or like here's you get these benefits or negatives for doing these things while doing this skill, and it's a pain in the ass because you always have to go, until you're like so
Right.
tuned in and familiar with the system that you just know it all offhand.
Yep.
You're spending half your session looking at the book and going, okay, this is how this works. This just lets you kind of skim over it and do whatever makes sense. The problem is, then the next time you do it, it may not make sense the same way.
Right.
You might do it differently, and then it may look like you're favoring somebody. There's a lot of inherent issues too with it. There's not really a good middle ground.
Yeah, I think that's
Comprehensive
fair.
program like a video where it just automatically does the searching for you. Anyway,
Just knows.
nature
But-
is an intelligence check that measures your ability to recall lore about terrain, plants, and animals, the weather, and natural
Yeah,
cycles.
weather. That's the other
Weather,
stuff.
that's neat.
It's like
I've
seasonal
never
and
used
weather
it for that.
stuff. It's like winds, harvest. Like if there's some sort of festival that comes up that's based on
Oh,
harvesting or
Okay.
whatever, is like that kind of junk.
that's something I'm going to do now in the future. In the next game I play, the character every morning when I wake up, whether we're in town or in camp, I'm asking the DM, "Hey, does it look like it's going to rain today, or what's the weather like?"
Make it matter. And
Yeah,
I'm
hey,
totally
no,
about
that's
that.
real.
If I had a player who cared about the weather, I would include it more.
Right.
But
Right. It'd be important if
nobody
somebody
gives a fuck.
asked.
I've at one point I had a thing where it told me every day. I had a calendar, and every day on it, it told me what the weather was going to be for that day. And it was, this is back when I was like, I had 55 spreadsheets to kind of play using. I was basically a game engine, and just referencing spreadsheet. Um, and I would always tell them, oh, it's slightly raining, it's drizzling a little bit. There's the wind is mild, and it feels like it's coming from the south. And nobody cared, so I stopped doing it and moved on to things that mattered, like story elements. But if
Right.
somebody gave a fuck about it, that would be it helps set the atmosphere if people care.
Yeah, and I think that.
How about this?
Go ahead.
Using nature checks to make your combat encounters more dynamic, because that's what's happening there. When a player is interested in the weather, right? Eventually, you're gonna have you're like, all right, you know what? Today it is a torrential downpour. Well, now that combat you had planned for that day, now you got slip and trip hazards, right?
Everything's slightly obscured.
Everything's slightly obscured. Yeah. So you can use a nature check. You can use something as tiny and insignificant as that to help make your
Like
comments
see
more
it
exciting.
coming or whatever. Yeah.
Yeah.
No, I think that's a really good way to do it. I've included it for more like plot junk, as far as like it's just another way that you can know like things that I need to tell you as a DM basically. But I think that's a cool way to make it kind of go back and forth a little more. It's like, oh hey, it's like, is it look like it's gonna rain? Well, actually, since
How
you
did
rolled
you
a
look?
22, you're certain that it's going to be about 4 hours until it starts raining, but once it does, it's going to come down, kind of thing. And like, oh shit, all right, maybe, yeah, we'll set this up so that we
Right.
know that they're going to be coming at us while it's right when it starts to really pour or something, you know, and then like that, you know, that can be huge, especially if it's a really large scale battle or something.
Well,
You've got to entrench, defend it or something, and it's raining. That's big time.
I've always found at least when my experience as a player, the weather effects in general, not to take it off the nature portion of it, are very poorly underutilized. I think. I mean, you could do a whole session of Table 13 talking about weather effects and how to include them to make your game more exciting. But I digress.
We're gonna. It's on
Are you
the
talking
list
about
now.
like sound and stuff?
I
Or are you
think
talking
no,
about
just
actual
using
like
it
I'm talking about,
in
I'm
game.
talking about actual weather effects in game that affect.
oh, like they affect your party?
Right.
Yeah.
I gotcha. Okay.
Yeah.
Yeah, and I think that would have a really good place in a game that's like really gritty, you know, and realistic. Because then you're worrying about like
Not too high magic.
this day you're not
either,
going to
because-
travel as far, or you might get a level of exhaustion because it's really hot out, or you know, something
Right.
like that. And having somebody with nature in that scenario, they're going to want to utilize it so that they can travel
Right.
in a way that doesn't hinder them, as
That makes
know
sense.
when to stop for the night, that type of thing.
Yeah. So
The only other thing I've got on this is natural cycles.
So like
So-
the moon cycle.
I was
that
gonna
what we're
say,
talking
yeah.
about?
What do they
Like-
mean by it? Probably like tides, seasons,
Migrations.
I think like food.
yeah,
chain
maybe
stuff.
migrations or breeding pattern type things. Yeah, like
So the
the
locusts are coming this year.
sure. All right,
Okay.
there you go. That
See,
could
you know,
be
that
another
stuff really
thing,
doesn't matter
yeah.
in like 99% of scenarios.
Yeah, most games don't.
Unless you make it
and
matter.
not enough time is
Right.
passing to like for it to be super relevant. You know, it's like, well, it's a week from when we started the game 6 months ago, so
Right.
or whatever. You know what I mean?
So what's
If
going to
you're
happen in
my games
6
anyway.
months doesn't
Yeah.
really
Yeah, so
mean much till
there's
4
like
years
one
down
of
the
those
road.
checks that's relevant, and then they just know that information, and then it's but
When nature does get a chance to shine, though, it really does shine. Like, for that example there, your players step out of a portal back into the material plane into a random location. They don't know where they're at, but their nature-based druid or ranger can see a bird pass overhead, and on a successful
those are
nature
native.
roll can be like, well, you know that this bird is in this part of the world and this climate.
yeah, like boom,
You know
okay.
roughly
Come in
where you're
clutch.
at.
about
Yeah.
once every 6 years. They just really save your ass.
It's like a more specialized version or a less specialized version of animal handling. But so the next one we got down the list then, unless anybody
Religion?
has any burning, it is perception. You skipped all the P's.
Oh, I'm just guessing because my list doesn't go in alphabetical
How
order.
dare you.
'cause It's stupid.
Are you talking about
Perception.
the most overused skill in the game that we're
Oh
talking
my
about now?
god.
It's
Every
definitely
character I
the
have
most
is-
used skill, that's for sure. But I
Your
mean, looking
wisdom
and being aware
perception
of,
check lets
like,
you spot, hear, or otherwise detect the presence of something. It measures your general awareness of your surroundings and the keenness of your senses. For example, you might try to hear a conversation through a closed door, eavesdrop under an open window, or hear monsters moving stealthily in the forest. Or you might try and spot things that are obscured or easy to miss, whether they are orcs lying in ambush on a road.
it could be
bugs
oars
hiding
lying
in
in
the-
ambush. You
It
never
could
know.
be. I mean,
Fucking
depending on
dickhead
the,
oars.
right? like that you mow, that you row with, or like
That you mow with.
Or
Yes.
that you mine.
I'm done with you. Whether they're mowers lying in ambush or on a road, bugs hiding in the shadows of an alley, or a candlelight under a closed secret door. That gave me a
So,
lot
yeah.
more information than medicine did.
Exactly.
'Cause
I do
you-
think that it's going to be the most commonly used check, though, because looking, listening, hearing, these are the things that your character are doing literally all the time, and that really, it's the okay, roll me perception check to see if you notice before the other people notice you, kind of like that happens almost every, or with a lot of encounters anyway.
but it shouldn't be. And here's why.
Okay.
Passive perception.
Yes. No, I think
Unless
you
somebody's
can use
like,
passive
I
perception.
want
for
to
that
look
stuff.
for this thing, they shouldn't be rolling perception checks.
Yes.
I as a DM try my damnedest, and sometimes I fuck it up, to
Yeah.
not ever call for a perception. I'll try to utilize their passive perception unless they tell me that they are looking.
Like I want to get a closer look at something, or
Right.
like I want to really study X. I agree with that as well. I use passives for almost all the skills, as it just sort of like a standard. In a lot of situations, it's kind of just like you would know this because your nature is 10 plus, or you know what I mean. Your uh, passive nature is like 15, so you'd be aware of this, this, and this kind of thing, or something like that. But
Like taking a 10 or whatever.
yeah, and I think that there's something to be said for that as well. But yeah, no, there's a ton of use of perception, which yeah is maybe not always warranted. I think. Like if you're trying to look across a bar to see if you see somebody else in the crowded bar, you probably don't need a perception check. And I'm guilty of doing that too. Like it's not like I'm not trying to. I do that shit, and it's dumb. I realize afterward, I'm like, I shouldn't have.
Yeah.
Whatever. Too late now.
Well, and
But
it's like that and investigation, because they kind of go hand in hand a lot of times. They get miscalled from time to time, but
definitely an overlap there for sure.
if something's hidden under the bed and you're going through somebody's house, that should not call for a roll.
I
Because
mean,
I don't think you
probably
should
not.
miss that. If you're searching the place, you
I
shouldn't
think
miss
you
something
could-
sitting under the bed.
You could call for, if I call for an investigation, so that's a situation where I'd usually say that that's investigation, not perception, because I'm sort of the camp of if it's something that you can do with your arms crossed and not moving around the room, then it's a perception check. If you are putting your hands on stuff, then it's investigation.
Right. Okay.
But it's really slushy and it's not clearly defined. So there's a lot of weird ways to distinguish between those two. But the gist of it is like, search versus spot, listen,
Right.
and so on in 3.5 to me.
I guess what I was trying to
but-
arrive at though is I hate when you call for a roll to see something and you don't get to see it because you rolled poorly, but it was like painfully obvious.
Yeah, it's like a
Not
terribly,
painfully obvious, but like
like-
something that you would have seen.
just like, yeah. And that's, I think, one of the other ones that's, yeah, if you that's where I use your passive, even if you've rolled, like if you roll a 6 altogether, but your passive is like, 14, you'd find the thing that's under the bed, like
Right.
because you would generally, it's just the chance that you could get a much better look at it. And I think a lot of times, yeah, stuff like that's just hidden under the bed. It's like, oh yeah, you like just looked under the bed and there it is. Like, cause you don't need to check for everything. But I think if you get a really good check, it's something that you can supply other information with. It's one of those like I guess like information gathering skills that the character's ability to gather stuff from which they're going to draw conclusions it's investigation, it's insight, and perception. Basically, it's how they confirm stuff that they think they know about the world and that they're like hearing or whatever, I guess. I don't know.
But Kyle, we haven't heard much from you. Tell me about your experience with perception checks.
Man, with perception, I too am guilty of overusing perception checks, and at the same time, I am also in the boat with you, Shady, where I am trying to get myself in the mindset of not calling for them as much as I have in the past. To me, and I've always looked at, in regards to the perception investigate thing with 5th edition, I'm along the lines the same as you, Eric, with if you're not actively putting your hands on diagnosing and really like getting hands on, you're not really investigating, you're just looking, and which is perception. Something I learned very recently in the game we had the other night, that when it comes to rogues and their ability to detect traps, that is, I always rolled an investigation. I figured if you're going to roll, and see a door and investigate if it's traps or look for traps, you'd be investigating. But apparently, rules as written, it's perception. So that was new to me.
I would argue that depending on the type of trap, that it could be either one.
Sure.
I would say if
And
it's a
I mean,
built-in mechanism inside the door or the chest or something, investigation, you could make a strong argument for that. But
I think you
if
could.
it's like a snare on the ground, I think
Yeah.
perception is what you'd be looking for there.
Right.
Yeah,
And
that
I
makes
think
sense.
that's the thing, though, is there's also the other side of it is like investigation is basically like your character's deductive power. It's basically they're able to see it's their ability to draw conclusions from information that they've gathered with perception is sort of that's I think that's kind of the other way of handling that split. So it's pretty much like solving puzzles and things like that, getting information out of a bunch of books that you've looked over or something is a lot of what you'd use investigation for
If I
rather
was a
than
secret,
a
where
search
would I
kind of
be
thing.
hidden?
Yeah, which is like, so the problem with that sort of a logic to me is that basically then all you're doing is you're rolling investigation checks to solve riddles that your player doesn't know or something if it's not also kind of a search based check, but I think perception basically is being aware of like physical stimuli. So you could totally say that whatever searching has to be done relies on your ability to perceive things or something. So
I honestly don't have a whole lot to say more about perception. It's one of the more
Yeah.
clearly defined skills.
Yeah. Next would be performance, which is a front runner for the most useless skill.
Oh,
I
God.
disagree 100%.
It's so worthless. Like whatever you're doing
there
with
are 3 times.
performance, you can use either a deception, a persuasion, or a musical instrument proficiency check, or a
I
tool
disagree.
proficiency.
I disagree. I think that deceiving somebody by putting on a show, by pretending to be somebody you're not, like, while not directly speaking with them. So if I come up to you and I want to tell you I'm a police officer or something, and I'm lying to you, I think that's a deception check. But if I want to
Right.
if I want to appear to be a police officer arresting somebody else or, one of my other party members or something and trying to make it look like something's happening that isn't happening, performance is the check.
I feel like that's a
It's like
really
acting.
semantic distinction, though. Like, because that's what lying is. Lying is also like acting. It's just you're only doing it to one person at a time, and that's like a weird
Right, but I
way
think
to
deception
draw a
is
line
like
on a skill. I think.
is while you're interacting with the person. Performance is when you're performing.
Yeah, like being observed. I get that. That makes some sense. I still probably don't think that there are many situations where I wouldn't feel just as comfortable getting a deception check as a performance check or whatever. But
I think I'd
but that's
allow
fair.
it, and if somebody argued for it, it wouldn't take much for me to allow it.
That's
I
fair,
try to
though.
push for performance on stuff like that because it's an underdog. Um, so where somebody would try to argue nature for an animal handling check, it's kind of the
Right.
same. It's kind of a
Yeah.
scenario the same way. But because you never let me read these, your charisma performance check determines how well you can delight an audience with music, dance, acting, storytelling, or some other form of entertainment. That is literally all it gives you.
Yeah.
Yep. So,
It's like, what's a tool proficiency then? Or, like, what's the point of the musical
I mean,
instrument proficiency?
you
then?
can't tool proficiency storytelling, and you can't do it for acting.
Wow.
You can't really do it for
Sure.
dancing. But
Okay.
music, yeah. All right. The tool proficiency will take care of the music one.
Well, to interject here, I think the difference between tool proficiency, like a instrument proficiency, and a performance check, to me, sure, I can play a guitar, I can strum some strings and some chords, but I can't put on a show.
Okay. It's like a stage
But
presence kind of
that's
concept
so much
or
minutia,
something.
right?
Right. That's the
Like,
point. Is then you need
let's
both.
break a skill
and
down.
like,
Let's have one skill handle both looking and hearing and seeing and feeling, and also
But-
finding traps. But let's have 2 different skills for playing a guitar and looking good while doing it.
Right.
You
Like
know?
that seems unnecessary, I guess. And yeah, so I get that, but I think that maybe that I could, but I could say that that's a persuasion then instead of a performance. It's like, no, you're just trying to, sway the crowd or something like that.
Right.
But so it's meh. I think it's good, but it's exclusively used for bards who are trying to make performance checks for certain things, and that makes it seem silly to me to be its own
It is
skill.
silly, but it's so great. It's so great to be really good at performance. Just because then you can try to use it for everything.
Right.
Right, and
You know, that's
would-
what I intend to do with roll off is just anytime a check is can I instead play
roll
my
performance?
drum really well
Really?
and dance my way out of this scenario with my happy feet.
mirthful
My
legs
mirthful
or whatever it
legs.
is.
I have to I don't think it is primarily a bard only skill. I think it is by default the easiest to slot into a bard character, but anybody, any class can be proficient and perform and
Yeah.
tie it in to role play. A wizard who could pull a book
Like a
out and
street
start reading a
mage or
soliloquy
something?
or something. You know?
Absolutely. I just
think
it
like
tends
I
to
think-
be if you're interested in playing that kind of character that you
Right.
end up making a bard.
True.
Not universally.
You can make
but-
gladiators, right? That are able
Yeah.
to put on a very interesting and exciting fight.
Yeah.
You know,
Sure.
watching two
okay.
people sword fight
Yeah.
that are just like, you know, whatever's.
It's like a faint, WWE kind of thing where it's stunt fighting kind of thing.
Oh my
sure.
God.
Yeah. All right. There you go. That's a reasonable one that maybe I don't, you can kind of swing deception there, but that's a stretch maybe. So I don't know.
They
That's
actually
all right.
have a background.
Yeah, gladiator.
A gladiator background that's a variant of performer or whatever. That's I've always wanted to play one of those, but I've sworn off fighters. because I'm too good for fighters. The
And
boulder.
I mean, what about the situation when you have your
The green bastard.
6 intelligent barbarian who has to put on a play and distract while your party infiltrates into the evil castle to save the princess?
The sock puppets and crayon
beginning of Final
drawn
Fantasy
background
IX.
scenes. Hey, all right, yeah. Oh my God, that's exciting. Anyway, okay, we're
Enough on performance.
not going
it's
to make it to
garbage.
the end of the list here if we're not going to move, if we don't get moving here. So
Do we
persuasion
need
is next.
do we need a 10-minute break tonight, or are we going to march through the rest of these skills?
If we're going to get through the rest of this, we probably ought to just keep rolling.
Let's
Otherwise,
do
we're
it.
going to go a little long. All right.
I got room
You
left. in my
you're gonna
bladder.
make it without a break here, Kyle.
Oh yeah, I'm good. I'm good.
Okay, we'll just rock and roll then.
I'm gonna
yeah,
assume persuasion's
persuasion.
the next.
It
Okay.
is.
When you attempt to influence someone or a group of people with tact, social graces,
Did you
or
see that?
good nature, the
Group of
DM might
people.
ask you to make a charisma persuasion check. Typically, you use persuasion when acting in good faith to foster friendships, make cordial requests, or exhibit proper etiquette. Examples of persuading others include convincing a chamberlain to let your party see the king, negotiating peace between warring tribes, or inspiring a crowd of townsfolk. Don't tell me I can inspire a crowd of townsfolk using persuasion, and then
Mm.
tell me that I'm using performance to delight
Right.
an audience with storytelling. Get out. Get out of here.
Performance is
Performance, you
worthless.
suck.
Worthless. Totally
No.
accounted for with everything else,
All right.
or with something else, every aspect of it.
Oh, what's his name?
but I think. Sorry, go ahead, Kyle.
Who was the who? I promise this is on topic. Who's the actor that played the president in Independence Day?
That is
I'm
is
not
not
Bill
sure.
Pullman.
Hang on.
Bill Pullman. All right.
Okay.
So that infamous speech he gave, right? Would that
Okay.
be? And he had a crowd. Was he
Yeah,
performing
yeah,
in front of a
okay.
crowd, or was he being an inspiring leader and persuading them?
performing.
Potato, tomato.
I think it is a minute difference, but I think is an important one.
That's fair. To me, that distinction isn't significant enough
I think what
to
what it
warrant an
comes down
entire
to,
new skill, I
if you
guess.
really wanted to determine what it was or what it wasn't, is how inspiring you were trying to be. If you're just trying to persuade people to believe the thing you believe, then that's persuasion. If you are trying to put the fear of God in their feet to get them behind it in some kind
Specifically
of
their
like
feet.
I don't know, whatever.
Fearful.
Uh, Yes, they're not
Sorry.
mirthful eggs anymore. Um, and you're trying to like there's a skill in hero system called oratory that is literally talking to large groups of people, inspiring them, and being like a talker like that. This is yeah, I feel like that would be sort of the performance situation where while persuasion would be kind of like getting you to vote for Pedro. Um, that type of like convincing people as opposed to like getting them to follow you.
Yeah,
It
all
is
right.
it is a super muddy line, right?
Yeah,
Like you could argue either way and it would be
yeah. I
totally
don't think
fine.
either way is
Okay.
wrong necessarily there.
Persuasion, convincing someone on an intellectual level. Performance, convincing someone on an emotional level.
Okay.
All
And I
right,
think,
yeah, I
yeah,
can buy that.
that's a reasonable way to distinguish. And I think also the way what Cortex brought up there is, as your character rolls, they're choosing the way they go about it. And so if there's overlap and it's just an aesthetic difference, there isn't any harm in that.
Right.
Like
Absolutely.
it doesn't hurt anything. It just to me it makes it feel like it's a worthless skill. Then if there's nothing it does that isn't also covered by something else, but there's no. It is aesthetically different, potentially, depending on how you define it. But I think that
Yeah, but at that
just
point, why
it's so
specify between
specialized,
between persuasion and deception?
right?
The only difference there is
Or
whether you're telling the truth
intimidation,
or not.
yeah. And
Intimidation's a
intimidation
little
is,
different because it's
well, but
like
you're
you're
still
like breaking
persuading,
people's
right?
legs and shit, right?
But I mean, it's still getting someone to do what you want. To me, those are still just the like social convincer skills. Like, you're doing it with menacing, stares and like, implied threats, or you're doing it with good old schmoozing, or you're filling them full of bullshit so that they think that what you're saying is the right thing for them to do, and then that's it's one way or the other though. But it's they're it's everybody's able to do that their own way. I just everybody should be consistent so your players know what to expect, I guess. Intimidation to make people like his performance, that's solid. um, but yeah, so after persuasion, if nobody else has any pressing
Yeah,
tidbits to add
persuasion. I
there.
mean, we covered everything in well, you guys did with deception. Honestly, I mean,
And
the only
yeah, with
difference is like,
performance, right?
I guess one thing to bring up would be like, and what we do typically in our games, and I'm sure most people do this, is like if you're trying to persuade somebody something, then you would roll a persuasion or a deception, or typically you don't intimidate them as sort of I guess I'll finish my thought before I bring in intimidation. You're either doing a deception or persuasion, and you don't always have to. And typically, we don't make the person let the other players know what they're doing, or at least that's how I've seen it done in our groups lately or in the past. Is you would roll it, and then that way the player that you're doing it against or the other players in the party don't know if you're lying or being truthful. I mean, obviously, intimidate doesn't work for that because intimidate is pretty much given away by the delivery. But
Yeah, right.
um, but something like persuasion and deception, um, we break those down in that way so that it's not so that it pulls the metagaming aspect out of it and sort of
Yeah.
lets everybody kind of be besmirched. That's not the right word. Be bamboozled by your tricks if you're being a tricky trickster.
That's fair though. That makes sense.
That's the only real thing I had to add to persuasion before I
Yeah.
move on. Do you have anything, Kyle?
It's worth waiting to distinguish what you're making until after they've done the interaction. That's fair.
No, I can't really think of anything else.
All
Add on to
right.
that.
That moves us on to religion then,
Oh, religion.
which is another pretty limited. It's a knowledge based check for me.
Also, it'll be a
It
sentence and
functions. Yeah, yeah, and to me, it functions similarly to, how like history or something would. You're just going to get a slightly different focus on the events of the past because your god's probably been around for a while, and you've got a sort of understanding of what he's been up to, or they've been up to, or whatever, over the past while. So you might have, maybe you can roll to get a certain piece of information that would otherwise be a history check if you have religion and you roll, 5 higher or something. I do a lot of stuff like that, and then also any knowledge about like undead or I guess like outsiders kind of fall into that category, like not material plane denizens.
What it puts in here is recalling lore about deities, rites and prayers, religious hierarchies, holy symbols, and the practices of secret cults. So I would, and I think I typically use it as just a lore dump mechanism
Right.
for when somebody's doing something with that pertains to, gods. Which, in every game I ever run, there's somebody burning down a church. So, that's pretty common in my games. Is because the church is always the bad guy. and that's just kind of the running trope. But yeah, there's not many other ways to. I suppose you could use it if you were trying to perform some kind of rite or ritual, but that doesn't happen very often by players in games because they're not really like contemplative priests typically. They're
Yeah.
crusading,
Right.
entities that run around and share the word of their god or whatever. But
and then that's kind of like role playing stuff that you wouldn't want to gate by with a dice roll. It's like, oh well, you weren't able to successfully complete this ritual that you've been doing since you were like 4 or something.
Right. And it gives that player a place to sort of like bring out this thing that maybe they've created that has become a part of your world.
Yeah.
And instead of, so making them roll for it and fail it is just kind of like cock blocking their RP.
Right. There's not as much benefit to the chance of failure on that kind of stuff. At least to me, it seems like that's just, you want to incentivize that as much as possible, because that's the kind of thing that's like, your player's investing in your game, which means everything else will be easier. So you want to promote that sort of stuff. So I don't like gating that kind of stuff behind checks.
Typically somebody who's a priest or a cleric who has knowledge in religion is going to have more knowledge in their religion than they're going to in others' religions, unless they're a scholar, unless it's something different than that. Would you in that scenario, would you do something about the DC, or would you give them some sort of bonus on something if it's directly relating to their deity, while giving maybe them a minus depending on how obscure it is from the norm? Or how would you handle that?
I would say that, my leaning would be, if it's something that they, would have a better chance at with like a traditional history discipline, then that would like modify the religion check a little higher. So if it's something that's really obscure, that their specific cult or following or whatever isn't familiar with, then maybe that shifts it by 5 higher. But if it's something that has to do specifically with something that maybe their church had to do with, it's a very obscure event, but it's not the same level of obscurity to that specific person. There's a reasonable chance that they would know about that thing, or it's like a regional practice in the town that they grew up or something. Then maybe it's a much lower check for them. It drops it by 5 or even 10 if it's like base knowledge that, of course, everybody who's gone through the discipline process here would know, kind of deal or something. But I think I generally, with that kind of stuff, it'd just be, you'd be aware because of this. You'd know this. And I'll frequently stop right before events and say, this is something that your church sees as this sort of a group, and they have this general opinion of them, by the way. And give me a religion check. Maybe you can learn a little more, know a little more than that or something. But, Kyle, how do you handle that sort of a situation, I guess?
So, in at least with Elderon, the campaign where I run in, religion plays an important role, and so I do use it as a way of driving the narrative forward a bit, giving players information that they previously did not have. depending on the type of class or their background. Like if a character is coming from a religious order or a specific deity, then they would naturally already have a lot of the information that they needed. They wouldn't have to make a roll for anything regarding their own personal religion, unless it was something very obscure or something that was kept out of the light of day. Um, but for other religions, there are many gods in Eldaron, and not all of them preach or practice the same thing. And so, uh, uh, a priest of a cleric of Garana may not know exactly what some of the followers of Tulia do or anything like that. So, for outside religions, yeah, I can see religion roles being in use for revealing some information you may not already have. One thing that I wish Fifth Edition did in regards to religion, and I realize that I think they try to keep it as setting moldable as possible, is having a role playing way of tying your character more towards your religion. And again, I stated earlier, I've been going back and looking through a lot of the old Pathfinder and 3.5 rules in preparation for learning Second Edition and or Pathfinder Second Edition. And one thing that they really that I think religion in Fifth Edition is missing is this character tie, role play tie to their deities. For example, there's spell preparation rituals where in order to for one god, in order to gain your spells for the day, when you wake up every morning, you bow and say a prayer to the sun or something. That's the kind of things that as a DM you can add in, but
Right.
as a player you don't think to add that 9 times out of 10. It helps to have that little bit of a role play push. I think religion in 5th edition is missing in that regard.
I agree.
I don't know.
That's definitely part of the. I think I think that's them trying to get that not muddled in the.
Right.
Yeah.
You're gonna get what you put into it. Get out of it what you put into it. If you're playing if you're in a party of people who really don't get into all that stuff and you're trying to play something like Pathfinder, then it just becomes a check on the list.
Right.
Oh, I woke up, do my ritual
and I
thing.
do my thing. Yeah.
Right.
And that's
When
if that's how it's
you can
being
take it in
described, then it
something
doesn't
like
really
5e.
matter. Yeah.
Right.
Sorry.
But if you're doing something, and that's really great though. These types of systems where it's real muddled in the mechanics is really great. Groups like ours, where we get so tied up in the minutia that nothing ever gets done, because then every morning I can sit down and describe my ritual, or or at least when it matters, when people are interacting with it and stuff.
Right.
To
And then
sort
when
of
you
put
say-
that scene in there,
Right.
then maybe the godless rogue is like, "What's this? What are you doing?
Yeah.
Right.
Why
What's
why do
going
you why do you care so much about what the sun thinks?" And you could
Right.
have some kind of like somewhat semi-deep conversation where someone's revealed about your character or the rogue's character or something like that.
Right. And you get that it's like a vector for just sort of meaningful inner character interaction. It's another background detail.
Mm-hmm.
And I think most of the knowledge skills function along those similar lines. It's just like it's a thing that you could maybe use for your character to be tied better into the world that they're like interacting with, and foster RP essentially. I think that's what's up.
But that's and so then you end up with people that and these are in here for that type of thing, I suppose. For DMs or for players to be able to use for that kind of thing. But then you can just not even use them and just make it a beer and pretzels game where you run around
Right.
with goblins.
Yeah, and like, give me a religion check. All right, you're sure that they're undead, and you actually know that they're ghouls or whatever, and that's the extent of what religion gets used for or something. Or you recognize this as this evil deity, so this mark is a mark of this evil deity, so these guys are cool to kill or something like that. You know what I mean? If that's all it is, that's all it is. There's no harm in that. We're down to less than 5 minutes for each of our remaining skills here, so Sleight of Hand is next. There's no way we're gonna make it.
How many do we have left?
There's
We save
3.
them for a little.
There's 3 left,
There's
so we
3.
don't have enough to save any reasonably.
Okay, well,
So sleight of hand is next.
sleight of hand, steal stuff.
It's basically that, yeah, pickpocketing. It's I think it goes a little more than that. It's basically just
Yeah.
fine motor skills and like, but I also try to use it as sort of like a physical version of deception. Sort of like if you're trying to hide something with with your body as you're walking up or whatever, you're trying to keep something out of sight or hide it on your person or whatever. That's probably a sleight of hand check. I do stuff where it's almost like a soft, subtle spell, where you can like maybe disguise your somatic components as, whatever, as like normal conversational gestures or something, with a high enough check. Or if anyone has to juggle for any reason, I'd say that's sleight of hand.
All right.
I've used them for things like uh, just being able to do things like, I guess it's basically the same thing as what Eric was saying. Now that I think about it, um, pulling off a pair of handcuffs or something. Something that it's like being able to manually dexterity. Get yourself out of because there isn't really like a way to stuff yourself in a chest, right? Like you can't like contortionism and like being able to pop your thumbs out of place and stuff to be able to get weaseled out of scenarios. Maybe not so much stuffing yourself in a chest, but stuff like getting unbound from wire or rope or something. Um,
I think that makes sense.
sort of being
I
able
would say
to
most
untie a
rope
knot
work
like
in
that.
general would
Oh yeah,
probably
rope work.
be sleight of hand. Like, if you're trying somebody up, I think there's somewhere where they suggest that would be a sleight of hand thing. But that makes sense to me. You might do like an intelligence-based sleight of hand check for knots or whatever instead of dex, but that could be a good one.
All right.
Or you could do like a sailor one. What you got, Kyle?
Here's a brain teaser for you. A magician performing a magic trick. Sleight of hand or performance.
I mean, one
This
more
is-
example of why performance is worthless. Yes. No.
It's
I
the
think
same. It's
depends
the
on-
same. It's the same thing. The tool
It's
proficiency
yeah.
and performance. Can you do the trick? Can you do the
Or
trick and make
are
it
you
look
a showman? Yeah, like
Right.
yeah. And I think that's the it's there's I can make it look like my the stuff's gone in my hand, or I can like David Copperfield the whole thing and there's like fireworks and like everything, like.
Well, and a lot of magicians' work is misdirection and
Oh,
it
yeah.
isn't necessarily just your hands and how you do your stuff,
Yeah.
but there's psychological aspects to it that I think you could just bring deception in and do instead.
Oh,
Right. Absolutely. And I think that's another example of perform being just basically you use it if that's what you want to roll.
Every single character that I make for your games from now on is going to have all of his points in performance.
They don't have points. It's just a check. It's binary.
Okay, well, it was the
Yep.
the point of the matter was that I'm going to put every physical aspect of my character into performance as possible,
Okay.
just so that I can cheese it for all of these different things.
I won't ever let you make a performance check ever. I'll just be like,
So,
I'm sorry.
no,
No,
here's
this
what
is
makes
actually a
performance
deception.
Here's what makes performance great. Sleight of hand is great if you're going to do magic tricks. But
Okay.
can you use magic tricks to convince a guard
Right.
that you're not?
There's a
See,
slightly
it's
different
wider.
spread of things that
Exactly.
it has access to than some of the other skills that
It's the
overlap
jack
with
of
it.
all trades.
Okay. I suppose.
Fake it till you make it.
It is like an efficient single use of a skill proficiency. If you're just going to put one in one social interaction skill, I could see the argument for performance then maybe. But just because you'd have to be sitting there arguing, well, but what if I, and just so you can get performance on everything. But
Yep.
but
that's
no,
my intent.
there's at
Enjoy
least an
that.
argument
Uh-huh.
there. Oh, I will shut that down. I'm not going to, I will help. Don't worry, Kyle.
No, I'm all. I think a character that would like if you dedicate your time, like if you got a suitcase full of like different outfits.
Sure, right? Timbre, yeah.
Oh God,
Yeah.
Amber. Yep.
So she's still dressed as a bee or what? I can't remember when it was.
Yeah, I think
but
when she was captured, she was a bee. She's
Oh,
still a bee.
God. It's good.
Timbre was a fairy creature I played for a game that preceded the Dragons of Pearly.
Tiny winged fey creature.
Yes. Um, that
Probably not a necessary distinction.
she was like just this she like danced and just flirted her way through everything. And it was wonderful. And she had all these different outfits she would put on. All of her spells were in enchantment spells. I chose nothing but enchantment spells. And it was just she won a rap battle against a demon. So there's that.
That happened. That was a thing.
As you do. As you do. of
As you
course.
do, yeah. When your DM puts a Baylor in a dungeon,
Everyone
that your
knows
For
that
level
demons
one.
three
are
characters
rap
are
gods.
running around in, yeah. Like,
Our
anyway.
next one here is survival,
Next is
right?
stealth.
Or stealth.
No,
Shit.
then it's survival. Yeah, we got 8 minutes. I don't know, guys.
We can do it.
Don't know.
We have 7 minutes now.
Uh-huh.
So stealth
Yep,
is running
this
around.
is-
It actually has a whole
Time
giant
keeps on
chunk
ticking,
here because it has to
ticking,
do with
ticking.
combat. So
Right.
because it interacts with combat, it gets 90% of the skills.
Yes.
Basically, to sum it up, though, stealth is being able to move quietly, and conceal yourself. So I mean, I guess that would be both being seen and being heard.
It's
You can't very well
basically
use
like-
stealth to make yourself not stink, but
Right.
but the other one's
I mean,
good for.
it's another performance, right? No, I don't know. Gotta get your disguise on.
But I mean, it's pretty. Stealth. How often do you call for stealth checks in a stealth? I think that's a pretty big thing because there's no like good defining like rule for that.
I don't have like a, when somebody says I sneak or I move here quietly, then I will say, okay, give me a stealth check to let's measure exactly how quietly you're moving, I would say is about the rule on that. Kyle, what were you going to say? Sorry.
Well, the way I handle it, because I love DMing for rogues. I love sneaky, thievy characters. So I end up I use stealth checks a lot, and from a combat perspective, in that regard, I'll use stealth checks in one of two ways. Either the potential encounter is either on alert or they're not. If they're on alert, then they will be actively rolling perception checks, and that's when your stealth check needs to be higher than that. Or if they're not on alert, then it's their passives, and that's what I base my stealth rolls against. In an out of combat situation, it's really I would use it in situations that could potentially lead to a challenge of some kind, whether it be an encounter or a social one. When there is a detriment to being caught, then if you're actively trying to sneak, then I will require a stealth roll. Other than that, I mean, I don't think I use stealth outside of those three areas.
One thing I thought that was really neat, and I'll drop his name again like I do every time. Cortex did last night during a session we had with him was he triggered his stealth rolls based on your location. So it's like your scene or your obstacle that you're trying to surpass. You made a roll for that. When you change scenes into another area, into a new place, he gave Kyle, actually in this scenario, an option to re-roll. He didn't have to. He could
Okay.
keep his
He
old
could
stealth,
keep his old
which
number.
would make some amount of sense
Okay.
because you'd have an idea how stealthy your current method of stealthing is, and you'd be like, well, I need to try something different, or or this is working just fine. And so he was given the option to either roll again or to his stealth roll.
I think that brings me to something that I think sometimes I don't know, like that I see as maybe like not the best way to handle it. Is the like stealth rolling a stealth check and then that sort of being almost like a WoW like stealth situation where they're just like invisible now to everybody who doesn't have a perception over a certain number. And like not trying to say that that's what Cortex is doing there at all, but I mean it just made me think of it, you know, the sort of distinction from like, you know, stealth as making you invisible and stealth as being hidden from the target that you're trying to hide from, I guess is what I meant there. And it seems like that's a similar point, is that it's like kind of about you know, like, yeah, you're trying to muffle your, you know, sounds and like keep yourself out of sight of a certain target. You know, like if you could maybe sneak across a room to, you know, a crowded room to make sure that a certain person doesn't see you, or something like that, and that'd still be a stealth check. And while you're not invisible, you know what I mean, like everybody else in the room can still see you, but that one person doesn't keep an eye on you the whole time or something like that. I think that that's part of the that there's something there that happens sometimes that I see with DMs, that's like, yeah, you're like, okay, well, you got, I do it too. It's like, okay, you rolled like a 26 on your stealth check. Like, yeah, you can walk right up and punch him in the face. It's like, well, it's not really how hidden works, you know? Yeah.
Right.
So I think that's
so. Let me hit you with this. So during combat, and everybody can see everybody. There's not really any obstacles to hide behind. Would you allow somebody to make a stealth roll to try to remain not the forefront target for the party, for the other, for the attacking party or for the enemy? Sort of trying to, like, you know, in video games when you have that option to have like an effect that causes you to not be chosen as you know, to not be aggravating,
lower your threat or whatever. Yeah.
Would you allow them to make a roll like that to seem less?
Well,
or would that be performance?
That sounds more like a performance roll. Yeah, exactly.
Isn't there rules for that already with the hide command, the hide action?
Well, that's actually physically like removing yourself.
Yeah, that's like disappearing or whatever, rather than convincing people you're less of a threat than you are. I think is the impression
remaining less. You know, that's like, imagine yourself in a scenario where there's you and 5 people and then an enemy and 5 people, and you're just trying to stay out of the way, and you're trying to remain sort of not noisy, not draw attention to yourself, and remain like less of a like, you know, I don't know, less prominent.
I can see that as stealth. I might say that that's more like even like a deception, persuasion, performance kind of thing, where you're talking about trying to, yeah, like basically convince people of a certain thing, whether you're doing it with, you know, your body language or words. I think that's still more in that line.
Are you trying to Are you trying to deceive them that you're not an important target? Or are you trying to persuade them?
That's the thing. Is like, are you convincing them of the truth or lying?
Well, whatever it is, I don't have to tell you which one I'm rolling. I just have to roll it.
Roll a dice. Yeah, it's funny, but yeah. So I think that's the gist of stealth. There is that it's, you know, yeah, it's how you hide yourself. It's the opposite of perception, sort of, or it's what you do to insulate yourself against opposing perception checks. And then with some other stuff, maybe it's sort of, but we've got no minutes and we got to do survival real quick here. So
all right, let's do survival real quick.
It won't take long.
Survival is the DM might ask you to make a wisdom survival check to follow tracks, hunt wild game, guide your group through a frozen wasteland, identify signs that owl bears live nearby, predict the weather, which
just owl bears
only
though.
Owl bears.
Only owl bears. Or avoid quicksand and other natural hazards. I like that they put predict the weather in here, and then in nature they literally basically say the same thing.
Yeah.
The weather, you know, to be able to recall lore about the weather. So
yeah,
that's silly, but
I feel like survival is maybe more region based, like, or well, no, I'd say that's the other way around. We'll say that survival's more generic.
It's the same ability for a different. One is from experience and one is from book.
Okay, I'll give you that.
You know,
that makes sense.
And that's why one's an intelligence check and the other is a wisdom check.
That makes sense. I was going to say that, you know, survival's like stuff that, you know, that would apply to like any environment, and the nature would be stuff that you know about a particular environment. You know,
got
like
a sharp pain in my leg today. That means it's going to rain.
Right. Exactly.
But then it does, because like
It's like
high
that stupid
survival.
picture of the rock that's like, if the rock is wet, then it's raining. If it's hot, then it's sunny. If it's not there, then there's been a tornado. Like, I hate it.
I think
Survival's
the
good.
other thing it says it says tracking in there, and while yes, totally, it's a thing that you could use survival for. If you have a ranger in your party, don't let people who aren't rangers track, because that's like a thing that they get and they act like it's a special feature and everything. And like if maybe they can get the general direction of things, but they're not going to get as give your ranger more information, I guess, is the thing, if
Rangers
that's something
get
that they're
shit on
into.
to begin with.
I don't
Like, throw them a bone where you can.
Oh man, that's a whole nother episode. Rangers are not that bad, but that's not the point. People hate on rangers, and I have seen several examples that just make me wonder where that shit comes from. But that's not. I'm not going to start that argument here. Almost 5 minutes after.
Our most powerful combatant in our party in Gods of Valor is a fucking ranger. So
Yeah,
it's like,
no,
I
I've got two other really
feel
good
ya.
examples I could bring
It's
up
not
too,
that.
but it's not.
It's not that. It's not. He's not. It's not bad.
It's not
Rangers
bad.
aren't bad, but they do have a few abilities that are basically just useless.
There are a
because
couple things that were done
completely
that were
exist elsewhere in the
poorly.
rules.
Yeah. They do get pooped on as a trope as well. I think like the concept of ranger is pushed into the background of a lot of campaigns as well. Like the things that they're good at aren't very important in a lot of campaigns, because you're not worried about like getting lost from one town to the next or something like that. In a lot of situations, not
Right.
universally, but like there's stuff where the things that they're good at is just it's more for people who wanted to play a character like Legolas or something. But yeah, cooking also probably survival, not like a charisma based check.
There's a tool proficiency.
Yeah, but if you don't have that, or if you're just like trying to make sure that you don't die, like gathering food, maybe then or something would
gathering
be a survival.
Food.
And if you
I
wanted
think
to
cooking would also
prepare
fit
it
under
more
that,
specially,
because there's grilling. You could throw
Right.
something on a fire, and knowing how long to cook it and stuff
Yeah.
would be like survival. Whereas utilizing cooking utensils would be utilizing cooking utensils.
like I'm gonna spice it up and mix it with vegetables or
Make
something.
a survival roll to tell whether or not the plant you picked up was aloe vera or was it poison oak.
Both, actually. We did a half
How
and half.
much do you suck to not be able to tell? Okay, well, people, that's on you, all right? Whoever made that mistake should have been a Boy Scout. Oh, man. Groups of 3. Leave it be. Come on. But no, I think that brings us to the conclusion of the 5e skill list.
And it's all garbage,
just barely.
and most of it's just the same skill over and over again. You can literally do
Performance.
everything with performance. Keep that in mind.
I mean, if you wanted to swing it that way, I think you probably could. No, I am
if you could-
acting as though I were a lumberjack. Like, maybe. All right.
You have to be as argumentative as me, and as willing to just cheese the rules to get what you want as me, in order to swing it. No, I try to be better about that than I used to be. I remember having
Nice.
full on arguments with Kyron during
man.
during our pirate game, about me
Always
trying
my
to like
life.
cheese silly things out of the game. But that's who
Yep.
I am. And
That
take
was
it or leave it.
how 3.5 worked, Everybody's got a little rules lawyer in them.
25% of the game is arguing about the rules, and you just have to live with it. No, but I mean, overall, the skills are pretty good considering. So it's not so bogged down in numbers and charts and spreadsheets and long explanations and searching through pages. But it is, because of that, by nature, kind of a slushy mess of, you can do things 10 different ways, and it really just comes down to the DM trying to be consistent in his rulings for his players, so that he doesn't create a scenario where somebody feels like he's not treating them fairly, or she's not treating them fairly, um, because somebody else got a different ruling last time, or whatever. It's a tough line to walk, um, but I think it definitely helps bring out a more narrative game that is less time researching and more time actually playing.
Yeah, I agree with that.
But
Yeah,
that being
good work,
said,
everyone.
thanks everybody for sticking around 7 minutes past the deadline here. I'm your best friend Shady. That's Eric and Kyle down below. Kyle, tell us about what's going on in your life since you're not normally here.
Well, the only things I have to plug here, as far as what's going on in my life, one which everyone should be watching, is Gods of Aether, which every other Monday, this upcoming Monday, is our next session, and let's see, guys have found themselves in a pretty interesting spot. It'd be interesting to see where it goes from here. But you can catch that every other Monday with myself and these two schmucks above, as well as the two Johns, which are not with us tonight. Um, Other than that, I'm also doing a second game with another group, Discord server, Rolling Thunder D&D. Twitch and Twitter and all that stuff is the same at Rolling Thunder D&D. It's called Legends of Eldaron. It is every other Thursday, but it is currently on hiatus for the month of August and will be returning September 3rd. On that Thursday at, if you're Eastern time like me, 3 p.m. Central, I think it's 4. But other than that, I think that's all I got.
Central, it's 2.
2.
But
Goes the other way.
Yeah, you're right.
other than that, we have a podcast that comes out every other Friday. Comes out the Monday before for our patrons. It's called Dragons of
Probably
Pearlandia. You
not
can
this
literally
week, though.
find it anywhere in the world. You open up
Just flip
your
over
pantry
your
in your
bed.
kitchen, and it's sitting
Yeah.
right there on the counter next to the
Lift up your cat.
Yep.
Boom.
Dragons of
Dragons
Pearlandia,
of Pearlandia.
Spotify, Apple Podcasts, fucking Google Play, whatever. It's everywhere. This coming week it's probably going to be a couple days late because
For the patrons, I'll have it by
goblins fucked
Friday.
everything
It's a
up, I
goddamn
think.
goblins. Sons of bitches.
Other than that, we've got, like Kyle said, the Gods of Aether that's happening on Monday. We have this every Thursday, and next week I have no idea what we're doing yet. But we'll tell you as soon as we know. We're doing a giveaway, which I don't know that I've actually. I think I posted. It's in our Discord. We're giving away 5 sets of dice on the 20th of August. And they come straight from Skull Splitter Dice. They are solid dice. I haven't decided which ones I'm giving away yet. And maybe I'll just pick random ones, and yeah. But you can join that giveaway by doing a number of different things. Subscribing to us here on Twitch is one way you can do it. You can share us on social media. That gets you an entry, and that doesn't cost you. Just come join our Discord. Read the news channel; it's in there. Get your chance to win dice. Other than that, I've really not got much else. Patreon. Come to our Patreon and give us money.
All of it.
Because you love what we do. You know you really do. You just love it. And you want to support more of it. And just more and more and more. So yeah, check that out. That's below in the description thingy. YouTube. But below the box you're watching right now. And we'll see you in a few days. Monday.
Yes, Monday.
Monday.
All right. Bye-bye.